of the manufacturing order versus the materials to build the window. I'm pulling it from stock. Well, since I'm going to reference the same configure component as the parent, I don't want to ask all those questions again. So I would reference in the rules, am I at the current component sequence of 1? If I am, ask these questions. If I've looped back through and I'm adding this as a component, I don't want to ask those questions. So when I loop back through, my component sequence would be a 2, and I would suppress those questions from being asked. The system cur part, okay, just kind of like the component sequence, it's going to let me know what the current part or component in configuration is. All right, you can see my expression I have there. I have sys cur part equals bike. Okay, I have a bike that's configured. It has multiple configured components. It has a bicycle frame. It has a front wheel assembly. It has a rear wheel assembly. Okay, based on the current part in configuration, I may be doing a lookup on a matrix or for pricing. So one of my keys in my matrix will say, okay, what's the current part in configuration? Am I at the bike level? Then I need to pull this value back for a cost or a price. If I'm at the frame level, I'm using that as a key of that matrix. I need to pull back a different value. So cur part is going to allow me to know what configure component I'm working on. Okay, like I said, there's roughly 75 system variables. What I was doing is I was taking a subset of those, most commonly used by users, things that we look at during our training workshop, our on-site workshops, or calls into the help desk trying to figure out how do I determine a first-time config to a reconfig, or what level am I at during the configurations. Okay, like I said, there are more. If anyone has questions, at the end, we can open those up and look at some of the different ones. All right, we're going to move on to the second type of variable that we'd like to talk about, which is our constant variables. Okay, first off, what is a constant variable? Again, it's another type of internal variable. So that means it's going to be prefixed with that I dash. Now, the difference between a constant variable and a system variable is that a system variable, that value will change based on each configuration session. Whereas a constant variable will have the same predefined value from session to session. Okay, again, the user's not going to be able to change this value. It's just going to be steady. All right, here is a list from the ByDesign configurator of all the constant variables that are available to you as rules developer that you can access or use in your condition statements. Okay, let's kind of run through those. It's a much smaller list. There's only 25 versus the 75 of the system. Okay, another thing real quick I want to make a note of, where the system variables, what's available to use based on your calling system, your host ERP system, the constant variables are going to be available to all of you no matter what your calling system is. All right, first constant variables we want to look at is the auto continue modes and the Boolean types. Okay, auto continue modes. When we look at a screen rule, okay, we have a flag on there that says auto continue. The selection is none. Move to automatically execute and move to the active screen, or execute and stay on current screen. Meaning that when the user makes a selection on a screen, do my rules automatically fire? Okay, if you look at the rules, it appears that that is, as a black and white value. Either I do nothing, or I'm going to move, and then if I move, I'm going to do one of two things. Stay on the screen I'm currently on, or I'm going to move to an active screen. Well, the constant variables will allow me through my rules to dynamically set that. Okay, so if I go through the first time, I may want everything set to none. I don't want it to move. Okay, but in a second execution or re-configuration, I may want to change some of those settings. Okay, change something to move, or something that was moved. Maybe I wanted to set it to none. Okay, so when I get to that screen, I'm going to throw an additional question up, stop them, make them answer it. Once they answer it, force the user to select continue. All right, the second constant variable that I want to look at is what we call Boolean types. All right, if you think back to the configuration variable definition, we have 4 data types. One of those 4 data types is Boolean, which is a true, false, yes, no question that we see through the UI. Behind the scenes, it's processing a 1 and a 0. Okay, so you don't have to commit to memory which one's the 1, which one's the 0. We have this constant variable called Boolean true, Boolean false, that have those values already defined. So if I think of my expression, maybe miscellaneous charge or miscellaneous options, okay, is a screen question. Okay, that brings up an additional screen for my product. Okay, it's a Boolean, true or false. Well, in my expression, to execute those additional screen rules, I can set it up to say O dash, my miscellaneous option variable name, is it equal to I dash, the constant Boolean true. If it is, then I want you to execute this branch of rules, bring up these additional questions. Now, one thing real quick with the constant Boolean true and the constant Boolean false that we see a lot of clients do, they don't like to have to type in all of those characters. So what they do at the star all level is they actually create a global variable called true, and they set it equal to this constant Boolean true, and they create a global variable called false, and they set it to this constant Boolean false variable. So when you're writing your expressions, instead of having to type out I constant Boolean underscore true, you're just typing in G dash true and G dash false. All right, configuration modes. Remember we were talking about the system variable called sysconfig mode? Okay, and I said that we have the implicit and the interactive. Okay, those have codes to them that get passed in from your host ERP system. We have constant variables that hold those values. So you can see here on the screen, we have the constant config mode active, which is my interactive, meaning I'm going to see those questions and I'm going to answer them. And then I have the constant config mode silent, which is my implicit. Okay, so when I create an expression inside of my system, inside my model database, I would have that sysconfig mode is equal to I dash constant config mode active, because I may want to show a screen a certain way in the interactive versus if it's in an implicit mode. The next constant variable that I'm seeing there is the configuration types. Okay, this is my initial configuration, reconfiguration, and my validation. Okay, again, we're going to go back to that system variable for config type. Okay, those are characters, 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so instead of having to remember which one is 0, which one is 1, which one is 2, or if we by chance change those values behind the scenes from one version to the next, you can just reference constant config type underscore config, which is my initial configuration, reconfig, which is my reconfiguration, or the validation. And then when we, like I say, migrate from one version to the next, this has got your bases covered, so you don't have to worry about having to go in and modify rules.